In a world of awakened beings, the dream of any ordinary person is to become a hero. But becoming a hero with just any ability isn't enough, as simple abilities hardly set one apart from normal people. The ultimate goal is to become a god, and after a long time of hard work, that day finally arrived for this guy. He started to be revered as a supreme being and gained the most powerful ability possible, the Supreme Finger. The story begins with a notice. A writer went on hiatus for personal reasons, which sparked complaints from readers. Apparently, he had been taking many breaks recently, but this time it seemed to be due to a game. The author, who is also our protagonist, is Yu Ilshin. One day, a dungeon gate opened, bringing unimaginable creatures into the world, creating a massive disaster for humanity. However, alongside the monsters, humans who had awakened began using this disaster to improve their abilities. The energy collected from hunting became a beacon of hope for humanity. These hunters are now classified from G to SSS class, where G class isn't much different from an ordinary person. A girl gazes at a poster of the hunter who saved the world during the disaster, alongside papers showing her own hunter classification. Even after her 10th class inspection, she complains about not being able to rise above rank B+ despite her hard work. Her complaints are interrupted by a man asking if she felt itchy. She turned thinking someone had recognized her, believing she was becoming popular. However, the man denied being a weirdo or a pervert, which irritated her, prompting her to channel electricity into her fist, ready to punch the poor guy. The man, taking advantage of his ringing phone, used it as an excuse to flee, claiming he needed to answer the call. As the odd man ran off, Mary was called by the receptionist as number 49, informing her that the evaluation room was ready. After her evaluation, holding her results, she was once again disappointed to see no improvement. She sadly concluded that surpassing her class limits was impossible. Her complaints were interrupted again, but this time by an alert on her phone that startled her. A portal had appeared in the city of Seoul, unleashing a thorned bull, which was wreaking havoc on the city. Hunters of rank A or higher were being summoned to respond. In a news report, a journalist described the situation from a parking lot where the beast had appeared, showcasing the destruction and despair it was causing. Civilians were trying to flee and no hunters had yet arrived at the scene. The beast was said to be capable of leveling an entire city. Amid the chaos, the focus shifted back to the peculiar man from earlier, holding a child's hand as they fled. In their panic, the little girl tripped, and the man, asking if she was okay, helped her up. Unfortunately, this delay allowed the thorned bull to approach them, roaring as it prepared to strike. By fate, a ball of lightning formed as Mary shouted the name of her attack, because to be stylish, you've got to announce your moves. The thorned bull was struck by the lightning storm, preventing it from reaching the two. Mary arrived, floating dramatically with electricity coursing through her, wearing a helmet that possibly concealed her identity. However, her attack barely scratched the beast, only angering it further. Realizing her attack was ineffective, she prepared to try again with full force, almost going Super Saiyan, unleashing another wave of electricity while yelling the attack's name. The strike created an explosion where the bull stood, and making one wonder if the bystanders hadn't also been caught in the blast. Landing on the ground, Mary questioned whether her attack had worked. However, out of the smoke emerged the enraged bull, charging at her with a powerful strike. Luckily, she dodged, but debris from the bull's attack on the ground knocked her down. As she got up, she questioned whether the gap between her and an A-class creature was really this vast. But there was no time to dwell on it, as she noticed the two people from earlier were still nearby, putting them in grave danger. Despite the overwhelming difference in strength, Mary told them to run as she tried to buy time, uncertain how long she could hold out. While channeling her power again, she noticed the bull weakening slightly, though it remained furious as it charged at her. She saw its reflection in her helmet's visor. Facing imminent death, she had a flashback of crying over her parents' deaths, vowing to one day destroy all monsters. However, a woman had warned her not to even dream of revenge. Back in the present, Mary, filled with anger, scolded her own vision for mocking her. In her momentary rage, she managed to channel her energy differently. Her eyes glowed with golden electricity and a buzzing filled her head. This was the god's crushing finger. Suddenly, all the accumulated energy burst out of her, almost like a transformation. She raised her hands, forming a massive Genkidama-like orb of electricity. She hurled it directly into the bull's gaping maw as it charged at her, causing a massive explosion of electricity in the middle of the city. Time passed, and a news report announced that the B-class hunter known as the Lightning Empress had managed to defeat the A-class monster. Reporters tried to interview her while civilians approached, but association agents blocked them from getting too close. Mary herself wondered if she had truly managed to defeat such a powerful creature on her own. Looking at the bull's remains, she felt as though she had finally surpassed her limits. But once again, she was interrupted, this time by the strange man from earlier, who approached her with a child to thank her. He called her by name Mary, saying he didn't know how to repay her for saving them. She replied it wasn't necessary, as their safety was enough. The two thanked her and walked away as she waved them off. Suddenly, she froze, realizing something. How could he have known her name when everyone only knew her as the Lightning Empress? She recalled that in the moment she unleashed everything in her final attack on the Thorn Bull, the buzzing in her head had been the voice of that man. From the man's perspective, he simply told what seemed to be his younger sister or daughter that they were heading home. Late at night, we find the odd man standing on a bridge, commenting about it being a popular spot for those wanting to graduate from Marvel's Phase 5. But of course, he wasn't there for that. Quite the opposite. He lamented that he, his niece, and many others could have been hurt or killed because of his phone. He threatened to throw the cursed phone off the bridge, but the scene abruptly cuts to the past just a few days earlier. At a cafe, he was struggling to write something on his notebook, but had no ideas with a deadline looming the next day. Like anyone would, he got distracted and picked up his phone, pretending to organize his apps as an excuse to procrastinate. While scrolling, he noticed an icon of a chest he didn't recall installing. Upon opening it, he saw the title Creator of Gods, and after the loading screen finished, a tiny ant appeared on his screen. He complained that he couldn't even read what was written, as the text was full of strange symbols. Nothing seemed to happen, so he decided to tap the screen, instantly crushing the poor ant. Upon its death, it dropped a small coin, which to his shock, popped out of the screen and hit him on the head. His phone displayed a notification. Since number 1 was crushed to death, a Shadow God's coin has been dropped as a reward. The cursed app also informed him that he was one step closer to becoming an all-powerful evil god. Confused, the poor guy held the coin, questioning if he had somehow gained a hunter's ability. He was particularly baffled by the idea of a power that relied on a cell phone. Still, he mused that if this had happened 20 years ago, he'd probably be in a psychiatric ward. Luckily, the world had changed. Now that he discovered this, he decided to confirm his status as a hunter at a hospital. However, when his name was called, nearly everyone laughed. Apparently, Yu Ilshin was a name people found amusing for some reason. The receptionist informed him that he had passed the aptitude test and had indeed gained abilities. Overjoyed, he envisioned his future as a hunter, even imagining himself as Superman. The poor guy wasn't aiming for an A class. Even a D class would suffice to let him quit writing novels and become a hunter. But his dreams were crushed when the receptionist clarified that he was G class. On top of that, his ability was matter creation. Disheartened, he listened as she asked if he wanted to register for a hunter's license, which cost 280,000 won. Being broke, our protagonist couldn't afford it. Devastated by his naivety, he resolved to at least meet his writing deadline before his editor scolded him again. Back home, he tried writing again but hadn't gotten past the opening. He lamented wasting the last 5 hours as he had only typed and deleted repeatedly. Unable to think, he turned on the TV to clear his mind. On TV, a journalist reported that the S-class hunter Bak Yuian had successfully cleared a disaster-ranked dungeon, bringing humanity a little closer to salvation. But since our protagonist wasn't interested, he switched channels, only to land on a skincare product commercial, which annoyed him further, failing to become a hunter and made him resent them. He gave up on finishing his novel chapter and threw himself onto the couch. At that moment, sleep seemed like the best option, but then his phone alarm went off, making him scream in frustration, as there was no way to turn it off. Already frustrated, he sat up and began playing that cursed game, massacring countless ants. By the end, he had amassed a mountain of coins and fell asleep while playing, nearly pulling an all-nighter. Upon waking, he realized all the coins had combined into larger ones worth 100 instead of 1. The phone notified him again, declaring him the unknown god and announcing he had met all the requirements to unlock the god's store. A chest appeared on his screen, asking if he wanted to open it. Naturally, curiosity got the better of him and he clicked yes, because curiosity killed the author. A bright light began shining from his phone as he clicked, but the scene cut to another location, an association office bustling with people. Among them, some expressed gratitude to the head of the Hunters Association and guests from the political and business worlds for attending. They were there to celebrate the fact that their country had finally produced a hunter who had unlocked the Hunter's store. Everyone was impressed and grateful, as having the Hunter's store in Korea was a monumental achievement. It was an extremely rare ability, even among hunters with creation-based skills. Now they could purchase items and abilities that transcended their current class limits. The announcer urged everyone to proceed and 2 people entered: Kang Woo, the S-rank hunter who had unlocked the Hunter's store, and Song Mina, the S-rank hunter assisting with explanations. Even as they entered, the president of the Republic, John Ha-hwan, remained silent. The announcer asked Kang to open the Hunter's store, and simply opening it generated such a powerful energy that it sent all the papers in the room flying, accompanied by a bright glow. In the end, everyone realized that nothing had really happened aside from the loud sound. The assistant explained that this was normal, as the store could only be seen by the person who activated it. However, thanks to Miss Seong's psychomancy, they would all be able to see it. Looking at the store, various items were displayed, including the blessing of the god of thunder and the legendary sword Excalibur. The men in the room remarked on how these items were known only from myths, and especially noted how incredibly expensive they were. For example, the blessing of the god of thunder cost 300 million gold, roughly equivalent to 30 trillion won. One crazy guy even commented that the price seemed reasonably cheap. Clearly, he lost his mind. The president quickly regained everyone's attention, reminding them that the nation's entire fortune depended on this store. They had to keep everything confidential until the project progressed further, and at least 2 S-class hunters would need to protect Mr. Kangwoo. Back with our protagonist, he confirmed the opening of his own store, and the app informed him it would cost 100 gold coins to activate it. He started wondering about the coin's appearance, suspecting it might be due to him being a creation type like Kangwoo. While the difference between their abilities was as vast as the sky and the earth, he questioned whether he might be able to earn even a little money from it. Inside the god's store, everything seemed nonsensical except for the prices. The rest of the text was random characters in a language he couldn't understand. At that moment, Ilshin had 372 coins and felt even more depressed, as all the items were exorbitantly expensive. After spending an entire night grinding coins, he had only managed to accumulate 300, and now most items were out of reach. Sensing his frustration, the app scrolled down to reveal an item he could afford for 100 coins. The lazy protagonist noticed the suggestion and decided to buy it, suspecting the app was practically begging him to. The item he purchased was called the Eye of the Blind God. Its description explained that it was a unique authority allowing one to fail to see the truth, even when it's right in front of them. By the way, speaking of truths in plain sight, where's the like, huh? Did you leave a like yet? Doshin read the item's name and wondered why anyone would want a blind eye. His question was immediately answered when his vision went completely dark. Panicked, he flailed around blindly, trying to find his phone. In his confusion, he considered calling 911. Unfortunately, his clumsiness caused him to stub his toe hard against the table. Let's take a moment to salute this soldier who suffered valiantly. As he collapsed to the floor in pain, his vision suddenly returned. Surprised, he got up and discovered that now he could read everything on his phone. He saw incredible names like Summon a Planet Devourer or Creation of Heaven and Earth. Despite the awe these abilities inspired, Ilshin couldn't shake the harsh truth. A G-class would always be a G-class, just as an S-class would always remain an S-class, exceptions notwithstanding. Pushing aside his doubts, Ilshin searched for something else he could afford. Luckily, he found an item called God's Crushing Index Finger, priced at 100 coins. He bought it as it was the only thing within his budget. Excited to use his new ability, he tried it out but quickly realized it only turned the air conditioner on and off. Shouting the ability's name while pointing at the air conditioner like a lunatic, he activated and deactivated it repeatedly. When he pointed at the TV, it turned on as well. That's when he realized the ability was basically just a glorified remote control. Still, he thought to himself, this could be useful. After all, in one night, this guy could turn on his TV while others were left with nothing but dark circles under their eyes. Since he apparently could control technology with the god's crushing index finger, he lazily tried pointing at his laptop. However, as expected, his novel wasn't going to write itself. In the middle of this failed attempt, he received a phone call. It was his editor yelling at him, excitedly proclaiming that he had finally written something worthwhile. But all the protagonist had done was randomly jot down his experience of killing ants, proving once again that he was a terrible writer. The protagonist could barely believe it, but of course the editor was only calling about one thing: money. He demanded to know when the next chapter would be ready, leaving Ilshin irritated. Sometime later, the protagonist logged back into his little game. He wondered if writing about killing ants was really such a good idea, and then, unsurprisingly, began exterminating more ants. He harbored no grudges against them. They were just easy targets. He killed his 302nd ant, and let me tell you, one day those ants are going to file a lawsuit against him. After some time and countless squash ants, they somehow fused into another 100 coin token, prompting him to check if there was anything affordable in the store. Unfortunately, the cheapest item available was the Skill Growth's Protection, which cost 1,000 coins. Determined, he decided to save up. Reaching his 404th kill, he noticed a red ant evading his every attack. It was almost like a boss character, frustrating him to no end. Furious, he decided to show off his guitar hero skills. Yet, after all his effort, the red ant defeated him. Failing to kill the red ant, he channeled his anger into slaughtering the others, bringing his total kills to 801. This increased his coin count significantly, but also his karma. An unnamed god informed him that he had reached 800 karma points, and with 200 more, he could unlock the title of Evil God of Power and Aggression. However, our poor protagonist wasn't even thinking clearly anymore. He had been gaming from morning until 3 a.m. like a true League of Legends player. Eventually, he passed out before even reading what was written on the screen. Unknown to him, his unique authority, the Eye of the Blind God, activated. Because of this, he was now fixated on acquiring sacrifice number 404, the red ant he had failed to kill. The protagonist regained consciousness, finding himself in a mysterious, empty cinema. On the big screen before him, almost like a movie, he saw an ant wandering through a desert. The ant questioned whether the god of the Shadow Tribe's power truly existed, as it had slaughtered its followers. Reflecting on this depravity, the ant thought that this so-called god resembled a demon more than a deity. Exhausted, the ant resolved to warn its companions before time ran out. With all its remaining strength, the ant finally reached a cavern. Inside was a colony where many ants were eating sloppily. The red ant's entrance immediately drew their attention, and it announced that it had found food. However, it also warned them that the god of the Shadow Tribe had massacred everyone. The ant urged them to band together and seek vengeance. After a brief silence, the other ants started mocking it, calling it a coward and a disgrace to the ant empire. Since it had been defeated by mere food, they said it should have died back there. The ridicule stopped abruptly when a larger ant shouted for everyone to be quiet. The ants fell into a disciplined formation as a tiny elder appeared, a shaman known as 808. The red ant 404 bowed deeply, addressing him as Lord 808. The elder solemnly declared that he could sense the presence of the evil god, confirming 404's story. With a booming voice, he proclaimed that this territory belonged to the Majesty, the great ant emperor. An evil god could not enter their lands, encouraged the ants prepared to attack. Placing a hand on 404's head, the shaman blessed it, healing its wounds through nature's power. Finally, he declared 404 a brave survivor, entrusting it to lead the ants to the god. The elder himself would handle the matter. The old guy was ready for action, Tadalafil and all. All the ants, driven by hatred for Ilshin, rose in rebellion. Back in the real world, the protagonist woke up, vividly recalling everything he had just seen. To him, it was just a dream, but it felt strangely real. Suddenly, he began reflecting, asking himself, did I dream that I was an ant, or have I always been an ant dreaming I was human? This guy was seriously losing it. A sound from his phone interrupted his thoughts. On the screen, 404 appeared again, leaving him stressed. This time, a message appeared, warning that nature rejects evil. Ilshin wondered if this was the same bearded ant from his dream. Suddenly, a faint light emerged from his phone screen, showing ants seemingly performing a ritual. They raised their staves and spears toward the screen, and in an instant, a massive beam of light shot out, hitting Ilshin square in the face and leaving a small cut. Meanwhile, in the ant world, the shaman and his forces channeled all their energy, launching a concentrated attack against the protagonist. The ants celebrated their success. The shaman declared they had succeeded, believing their majesty would be pleased and might even reward them with sacred blessings at the next banquet. But the elder grew silent, sensing a massive energy heading toward them. He screamed for everyone to flee, but it was too late. The energy consumed him, killing him instantly. One by one, beams of light descended upon the ants, wiping out many of them. Back in the real world, Ilshin was pounding his phone screen like a wild animal. The phone screen cracked under his relentless blows. This repair was going to be expensive. Having annihilated all the ants, Ilshin also managed to destroy his phone. He burst into tears, mourning his shattered screen. Through Kasab's, a message appeared. He had earned the title of Evil God. Surrounded by the coins dropped from the hundreds of ants he had annihilated, the protagonist finally earned the title of Evil God, which granted him the ability Cruel Assassin, rank F, a skill that increased his luck in battle. The protagonist grew irritated at being labeled as a cruel assassin and an evil god. After all, wasn't he just a normal, stable, and good person? Clearly. As the coins fused back into the ground, a small ring remained in their center. Strangely, it had a refreshing scent that seemed to clear his mind. He decided to put the ring on his finger, and instantly, his fatigue disappeared. But once again, the small alarm appeared on his phone. His authority evaluated the ring, revealing that it had once belonged to 808, who had worn it for his entire life. The ring was imbued with nature's magic, enhancing elemental power. The protagonist wondered aloud if the ring could help him do something practical, like turn on the TV from a distance. That was pretty much all his powers were good for so far. Laughing at himself, Ilshin decided to test his Eye of the Blind God on various objects. Surprisingly, it worked. He found out his TV still had 3 months of warranty, his laptop 6 months despite being used for a year and 2 months. Then he inspected his bed. It had been in use for over 10 years. The eye even advised him to throw it away, leaving him staring sadly at the bed. Reflecting on everything that had happened recently, he realized that the ring might enhance his evaluation power. Wanting to test this, he went to request a re-evaluation. At the counter, the receptionist informed him that evaluation margins of error were less than 1%. While the first evaluation was covered by the state, re-evaluations cost 1.58 million won, about 6,660 rias. She urged him to decide quickly, as the line was long. After much internal debate, the protagonist concluded that spending money on a rank F evaluation wasn't worth it. He told her he'd return another time and left. As he walked away, he muttered to himself that he should be writing instead of hanging around like a lunatic. But there was nothing interesting to write about in this place anyway. At that moment, the app on his phone activated again, using his authority to analyze everyone around him. What he discovered was bizarre, like a man named Park, 30 years old with hemorrhoids. Lol. The protagonist thought it would be too awkward to approach people and confirm if the information was true. Then he noticed someone interesting. Seong Miri appeared again, and her specialty was listed as sensational. What cheeky eye. He was puzzled why her full name was visible while everyone else's information was truncated. What kind of strange specialty was that? And why was she tingling? Curious, he walked over to her and asked if she felt a tingling sensation, bringing us back to the start of the story. The protagonist approached her, questioning if it wouldn't seem weird to ask such a thing. Spoiler alert, it totally would. But hey, why not walk up to a random girl and ask if she's tingling? He hesitated, wondering if he'd get slapped for no reason. This led to the awkward encounter where he asked if she was tingling. Of course, Mary was furious, channeling energy into her arms and nearly pulling off a thunder shock like a yellow rodent. Despite his attempts to explain, it was hopeless. Luckily, his phone rang, giving him an excuse to leave. The call was from his sister, whom he affectionately nicknamed the demonic sister. Running out of the building, he headed toward a nearby park while talking to her on the phone. She asked why he sounded so happy, suggesting it was because he finally had money saved up. At least he wasn't a full-blown unemployed bum. Yet, Ilshin said goodbye to his sister, yelling at her not to be late. Internally, though, he was panicking, grateful she hadn't canceled his babysitting duty, especially after his delay at the evaluation center. Walking among the crowd, he noticed people giving him weird looks. Maybe it had something to do with him yelling out loud to no one in particular. Shrugging it off, he reached the park. Sitting with his niece, he marveled at how adorable she was. He couldn't understand how his demonic sister had given birth to such an angel. His niece asked him what dark history meant. The question immediately brought to mind the terrifying glare of Mary, reminding him how this concept had just been rewritten in his life. When she asked what he was talking about, all he could think about was pinching her cheeks. Giving in to the intrusive thought, he squeezed her cheeks, remarking on how much cuter she was getting. She responded like a God of War QuickTime event, dodging and escaping. After a short struggle, she broke free, yelling at him to stop. She told him many times before that she hated it. Sulking, she turned her back on him, pouting. Ilshin knew that when she got like this, it would take at least an hour for her mood to return to normal. He had to think of a way to cheer her up, but he had no idea how. Conveniently, his Eye of the Blind God began analyzing her all on its own. It showed that she was 5 years old, her name was Chae Seong-yeon, and the authority revealed that she wanted to eat chocolate ice cream. Since the system had essentially handed him the perfect opportunity, he decided to invite her for ice cream. Her expression immediately changed, filled with excitement. At the ice cream shop, a cheerful attendant greeted them, and Chae ordered a classic chocolate cone. However, when it came time to pay, our protagonist pulled out a pile of 50 and 100 won coins, dumping them on the counter and asking for a chocolate cone. He had initially planned to buy 2 cones, but realizing his financial situation, backed out. The attendant stared in disbelief and annoyance at the heap of coins, irritated by the hassle. Let's be honest, he could have at least organized them instead of just tossing them out. Fueled by frustration, she began making the cone with a pitiful amount of ice cream. Ilshin wondered internally if she was doing this out of spite because he paid with coins, even though the ice cream was for a child who was destined to be a star in the future. Then it hit him. He could finally make use of his most powerful skill, the Finger of God Crusher, or, as we'll now call it, Remote Finger. He used it to manipulate the ice cream machine, creating a massive, towering cone. Sitting on a bench at the park, she held this chocolate ice cream sword, refusing to share even a bite with her uncle. Ilshin could only accept it, thinking about how calm the day seemed. But, as expected, he jinxed it. His phone alarm started blaring. When he checked it, the cruel assassin's skill had been activated, boosting his battle luck. Ilshin then heard a voice declaring that he, walking the path of great evil, would overcome the trials ahead and ultimately become a true evil god. His phone began flooding with notifications, and Chae, distracted, dropped her ice cream as she looked upward. 2 glowing red eyes stared back at them. The thorn bull's eyes. The scene replayed itself. The bull attacked. Mary intervened, risking her life to save them. However, this time the protagonist used his eye to analyze the creature, discovering that it was over 400 years old and sought to devour him to steal his divinity. And for what is hopefully the last time, or brought back to the future, or present, here on the bridge, Ilshin contemplated whether the creature had been chasing the unknown god, which was his nickname, the Godmaker app. This made him realize the bull had likely been there because of him. When the bull was defeated, a notification appeared, stating he had completed the trial and improved his cruel assassin skill. More importantly, he earned a reward. He could select 1 item for free from the god's store, with the conditions that it had to be evil and suitable for a low-class god. Annoyed, he blamed his phone for the earlier chaos. Just as he was about to throw it, a new message appeared, addressing him as Your Holiness. The scene shifted to the world within the app. Someone was praying to Ilshin, calling him the nameless god. During this prayer, red ants invaded the area, attacking and nearly killing several creatures resembling skinny, termite-like ants. Inside a room, a small moth, referred to as a saint, was praying for mercy to save her tribe. However, her prayer was interrupted as a massive ant burst into the room, accompanied by a small army. The ant referred to her as the Holy Maiden of the Black Tribe. The ant mocked her, asking if she truly thought she could escape the Imperial soldiers. As it advanced, the saint's face filled with despair. A question appeared on Ilshin's screen, asking if he wanted to save the desperate maiden. Remembering his own experience with the thorned bull, he decided to help, feeling her situation mirrored his own. The ant commander proclaimed that the saint should be grateful as an offering to the emperor. Before it could finish its generic villain monologue, Ilshin used his Finger of God to obliterate the commander and its soldiers. The saint, overwhelmed with gratitude, asked for his true name. When he replied, "You Ilshin," she began to revere him even more, granting him the title of Good God, Mysterious Redeemer. This change shifted his alignment from evil to neutral. As a reward for obtaining the title of Good God, he was gifted 100,000 God coins. For anyone doubting whether the app paid, here's your proof. The protagonist was was astonished, having earned 100,000 coins essentially for free. With what he had already accumulated, his total reached 108,700 coins. He opened the store and went straight for the item he had been eyeing, the blessing of the growing god. When he purchased it, the item materialized from his phone into his hand, a small vial of golden liquid. It promised to unlock the maximum potential of one's hidden abilities the more it was consumed. It seemed like a worthwhile investment despite being costly. However, the vial was filled with body fluid spilled during the training of the perpetual seeker of truth. Despite how unappealing that sounded, he drank it since it didn't have a weird smell. After finishing the entire vial, he grumbled that it felt like nothing more than an energy drink. Reading the description again, he realized the effect increased the more he consumed, so he spent 5,000 god coins on additional vials. After downing them all, he noticed no immediate changes. Then suddenly, he collapsed like a sack of potatoes. A notification appeared on his phone. The Godmaker assimilation rate had increased from 0% to 5%. The next moment, Ilshin was back in his home, waking up and wondering how he had gotten there. I'm wondering the same. He hadn't noticed the swarm of ants around him at first, crawling up his body. When he checked his phone, he finally realized what was happening as the ants scattered away. Thanks to the increased assimilation rate, the Godmaker battlefield had been updated. Essentially, the more the assimilation progressed, the more real the game would become. He begins running around his own room, knocking everything over while questioning what was going on with these crazy ants. But he couldn't even open his own door as the ants bit him. Looking around, he notices the window and comes up with the most idiotic idea I could imagine: jumping from the 3rd floor. This is like a movie. He started running toward the window, knowing that if he fell, he'd probably die, but he thought it was better than dying to ants, right? However, as he jumped at the window, he smacked his face against it, landing on the floor. The guy couldn't even break a window in a house and is called a god, while our boy Ning wipes out a dimension and is still considered useless. As he lay on the floor, wondering if he was really trapped, he got angry, stood up, and pointed his finger at the troops that were about to attack. Here we see Ilshin's strongest ability, the cookbook. He throws it at the insects, wiping out part of their army. The ants realize it's not a bluff, and he really could take out an entire group on his own. The book stays in the middle of them as the general orders the archers to advance, firing small flaming arrows that to him are almost like toothpicks or matches. The ants celebrated as the protagonist crouched, showing that this was the true power of the Empire. The general ordered all the troops to prepare an attack simultaneously, taking his head as a prize for the Emperor. But amidst the protagonist's despair, struggling to breathe due to the smoke from the fire, he saw a light, the best thing he could find in such a situation. A can of bug spray, and he shows no mercy. While the general was communicating with the Emperor, the protagonist used the spray on the entire army. I just think he forgot they still had flaming arrows, which essentially turned it into a flamethrower, burning all the ants alive. The ants experienced true terror. The problem is that his room was completely sealed, so the smoke accumulated and a fire broke out. So here's a tip, folks. If you got ants in your house, just burn them and you win the game. It's a joke, just in case someone takes it seriously. As he thought he was going to die from lack of strength, another message appeared, saying he could receive a gift or blessing from a high-class evil god of his choice if he accepted. Since he was almost dead, it was his only chance. When he accepted, his finger began to glow red, gathering energy. But let's set that aside for now and observe the city from above. The focus shifts to a massive lightning strike hitting the peak of a mountain. The cause of the lightning was none other than Xiao Mary, who was frustrated at failing to replicate her earlier attack. She noticed that her maximum effort didn't even scratch the ground, unlike when she used it and awakened against the spiny bull. As she pondered her chances for revenge, she sensed someone in need of help look toward the city, and we returned directly to the protagonist's room. Ilshin was staring at his hand, wondering what was happening since, after the glow, nothing had occurred. However, the system informed him that part of the silent nightmare's power had permeated his authority. Still, he complained because nothing had changed at all. Desperately gasping for air, he tried to use the remote finger one last time, but it didn't work. In the end, he collapsed to the floor entirely out of breath, with no hope left, thinking he would die. Suddenly, the wall beside him burst open as a helmeted girl entered. Upon analyzing her, he only recognized her specialty, dealing with ants. We then cut to the hospital, where he wakes up talking to his niece. She asks if he's really her uncle, given that the guy is all bandaged up and wrecked. To prove it, she asks him for the password, and my friends, the password is, "Your mom's so fat, she's hard to swallow." She's delighted it's really her uncle, but the protagonist's sister is furious. While the two fools hug, Che pleads with him not to get sick because he has to play with her. Then our protagonist gives 2 whacks to each of their heads, leaving huge bumps. The protagonist told her to stop since he was a patient and asked if she had forgotten that. She screamed that he wasn't going to get away with calling her fat, the scoundrel. Poor Che could only complain quietly, but she was also the only one who noticed a knock at the door. When she opened it, there was no one outside, just a basket full of flowers. Bringing it inside, she saw her mother pulling on the protagonist's arms, who was already suffering. It reminded me a little of Sesuke's scene in the Chunin exams. The protagonist looked at the basket of flowers, wondering if his manager had sent it, reading the ribbons that wished him a good recovery. discovery. We move forward a bit to when he's alone in the room, lying down and sleeping. In another building, watching him through the window, Mary reflects on how, when she defeated the bull and even when she was carrying him to the hospital, she surpassed her limits. She explained that she had been watching him for 4 days. Even during that time, she couldn't think of anything, but she wondered if he had something that allowed him to surpass limits. She then realized she was acting like a stalker, a weirdo. But she knew she had to leave before her older sister discovered she had escaped, though we don't know where from. However, she noticed the protagonist getting up with a pained expression on his face, and we transitioned directly to the dream world. There, the saint was in front of a tree with a tribal elder, who warned her to think carefully as she considered offering the tribe's treasure. Even though the protagonist had saved the tribe, it was an incredibly precious item. However, the saint interrupted him, stating that precisely because it was a treasure left by the tribe, she was offering it. She could not forget his kindness in saving the entire tribe from the imperial army. Furthermore, she believed he might forgive the tribe if they handed over their most precious treasure, as a small gesture of regret for neglecting him for so long. In reality, the protagonist had woken up furious at his phone, once again annoyed by the cursed app that wouldn't leave him in peace. He yelled at the damn ants to leave him alone, but when he looked at the phone, it wasn't about the ants. Instead, it was the saint and her 101 followers praying to him and offering him a tribute. This made me think about how gifts are given to high-class individuals. They clearly believed he was someone important. Complaining about what they might give him, we shift to a little butterfly delivering the tribute, a fruit. It was one of the 7 fruits left by the world tree Yggdrasil. He sniffed it to see if it smelled strange. It didn't. The fruit was likely very beneficial for vitality, prompting him to eat it right away since he was injured. As soon as he swallowed it, blue energy emanated from his body, while he tasted something extremely salty. He complained about the spicy, salty, and bitter taste, but within an instant, all of his wounds healed almost immediately. From the other building, Mary watched, baffled, questioning how he had managed this since he had suffered burns all over his body not long ago. Feeling better already, the protagonist looked directly at his phone. There he saw the saint and her followers try and get his attention. A new feature called God's Blessing had been unlocked, allowing him to offer blessings in exchange for the tributes his followers provided. Since they had given him a gift, he looked for something they might like in return. Meanwhile, with the ants, the old man from earlier was complaining to the saint that even after offering the tribe's treasure, nothing had happened. But then they noticed a white powder falling from the sky, almost like snow. When they tasted it, all their injuries healed. Even the ant, who had been hit hard in the face by the general during the saint's first appearance, regained its vision after that blow. Everyone thanked the god for performing a miracle, and he ended up gaining 101 loyal followers. Thanks to this, his faith points increased to 1,101, which generated 10,000 pure god coins instead of dark ones. One faith point equals 100 coins. The protagonist realized that even though it was just sugar, they liked it a lot. When you look closely, it's even kind of cute. In another area, apparently a commercial district, a knight asked Chief Park if he was really going to pay such a small amount for the Gorgon's horn. Meanwhile, another merchant announced he would buy everything at higher prices, even permitting hermits to sell there. Elsewhere, people bumped into each other and started a random fight. Ilshin walked among the crowd, knowing it was dangerous, looking for a quieter place to sell his items. He found a nearly empty shop with no one around, so empty even the crows stayed away. When he entered, a lieutenant immediately greeted him, welcoming him to Heej's exchange house. When he approached, stating that he wanted to sell some items, she asked if he was a hunter. He denied it, saying he didn't have a license yet. She understood and handed him a form to fill out at his leisure. He began reading the questions, most of which aimed to find out where the items came from. They needed to ensure he wasn't pulling a shady trick. Logically, he was at an impasse since he couldn't say he got the items by killing a bunch of ants in a game. If not for the home repair courses, he wouldn't even be selling them. Before he could answer the first question, the door opened again and a group of 3 people entered. One of them was massive. The apparent leader of the group started talking to Miss Dai. While they chatted, the protagonist observed them, only to be met with a piercing glare from the big guy, the kind of glare that felt like it could push your eyes back into your skull. The one-eyed brute even had the audacity to say the muscles of the 2 guys in his group were weak. If they were weak, I must be a toothpick. Ilshin even wondered if they were using steroids for their muscles to be considered weak, because it was just unfair. While he tried to act like he wasn't watching, the group leader discussed the shop's recent struggles with Dai, saying he had brought some items to help her out. In the back of his mind, the protagonist kept complaining about the one-eyed brute constantly evaluating things he wasn't interested in. Meanwhile, Daddy pulled out a mithril armor from her case. The one-eyed brute analyzed it and revealed that it was actually scrap armor enchanted with illusion magic to alter its appearance and reinforcement spells. While the leader bragged and demanded 3,000,001, the protagonist mentally labeled the item as faker than a $3 bill. The leader grinned slyly as Day went to fetch money from the safe. However, the protagonist interrupted, pointing out that the item was fake. Mentally, he questioned why he was making such a foolish move by getting involved. Everyone stared in silence before the massive guy grabbed the protagonist by the collar and lifted him off the ground. The leader asked him if he could prove it was fake. With no other choice, Ilshin raised his finger and used the pointer finger, the remote finger. It nullified the enchantments, revealing the armor's shabby, original appearance. The big guy was furious and tried to punch the protagonist. However, Hyun, the group's leader, stopped him, apologizing to the protagonist, assuming he must be some high-level hunter. He asked if they could leave peacefully, even though the brute still looked like he wanted to land 3 punches on the protagonist. As they left, the shop owner thanked the protagonist for helping her and asked if he was a hermit. Quick pause to remind everyone to drink water, comment, and like the video. The protagonist's thoughts explain that hermits are recluses, people who either choose not to become hunters or have left the profession to live normal lives. But then she shifted the topic back to what he wanted to sell, asking him to hand it over. She began evaluating it and noted that it had no more than 12 mana, which was disappointing since the scrap armor from earlier had 560. Once again, our beloved Eye of God X Machine intervened, informing the protagonist that it would be better to give that ring to Seong Mary, who was nearby. He remembered her as the Lightning Empress. Outside, we see Mary, who had been following the protagonist, wondering if he had used a high-grade potion to recover from his wounds so quickly. She suspected he might be a high-ranking hunter disguised as a G rank, reasoning that it wasn't possible for someone weak or poor to use such a high-quality potion. Shigen considered that if he could figure out her identity and recover so rapidly, perhaps he could help her surpass her limits. Her thoughts were interrupted by the shop door opening. As she hid, she realized she was behaving like a stalker, and if her older sister found out, it would be bad news. Caught up in her thoughts, she didn't notice Ilshin approaching until he startled her by calling her name, saying she had shown up at the perfect time. And as this Manhwa loves cutting time, we jump directly to near sunset. On top of a building, we see a bright lightning bolt descending from the sky, generating an electric wave. A scientist measuring the data remarked that it reached 7,000 hertz, which is impressive even among A ranks. Mary was clearly confused, wondering if a ring had truly enhanced her powers. She remembered the strange Ilshin casually approaching her, placing the ring in her hand, and running off like someone too scared to talk to their crush. She thought about how he had given her an incredible item as if it were nothing. But before she could dwell on it further, a man clapped his hands, catching her attention. It was none other than the association president, congratulating her on becoming an A rank. Seon Mina quickly warned her not to get cocky just because of that, reminding her that she was still just an A rank. Kang-woo, however, criticized Mina's grumpy attitude, congratulated Miri, and invited her to complete a dungeon with him someday. Adding pressure, Mina emphasized that if our Pikachu sought vengeance or something similar, she would personally put a stop to it by force. But Pikachu, Miri, thought that with the protagonist's help, she might be able to surpass her limits. This would allow her to achieve her revenge, turning it from just a dream into reality. Speaking of dreams, our protagonist unintentionally activated his innate eye power again, seeing another scene in the game world. Apparently, the Ant Emperor issued a royal decree for General Kamakiri to leave 5 million soldiers to punish the evil being admired by the savage dark tribe. Essentially, the ants were furious about losing 100,000 soldiers to our master. After the supposed emperor finished speaking, General Kamakiri and the army accepted the decree and began preparing to go after Ilshin. The protagonist woke up from the dream once again, this time in his bedroom, which was still charred from the last time. Reflecting on the previous events, he concluded that what he had seen wasn't just a dream, since the ants had almost killed him for the 50th time. He wondered what he would do if they attacked again by surprise, but was interrupted by a call from someone nicknamed Endless Nightmare, asking if the protagonist needed power through chat. When the protagonist asked the classic question to figure out who this crazy person was, he was called an immature and weak god and was told to sacrifice humans for power. However, the protagonist just told him to, threatening to block him, which scared the nightmare. But he wasn't important for now, as God's blind eye activated again. Inside the game world, we saw General Kamakiri threatening the Dark Tribe in the name of the Emperor, and the phone showed that there were about 4 days left, with the Saint and her 101 followers being scared, making the protagonist realize that he needed to prepare this time. We skip a bit in time and we see Ilshin looking at himself in the mirror, complaining because the self-assessment wasn't working, unlike when he evaluated others. But after another attempt, it finally worked, though not as he expected. It only told him that he was a fragile loser. Since he had some god coins saved, he decided to buy some things in the god's shop, like the flames of Gehenna. Now he basically had a lighter, since only a tiny flame came out of his middle finger. He thought that he really should have thrown that damn phone away when he had the chance, but while looking at the screen, a message from the manager popped up, complaining about how long it had been since the last manuscript. Even though he had gone through a personal situation, he still needed to deliver it soon, or well, he knew what would happen. He'd be on the streets. The protagonist told him he would take care of it, and then started thinking about the drink, but it wasn't beer. It was the golden drink from before. He said he would buy 20 of them. We jump ahead to a while later, with the creator of God's assimilation rate increasing from 5% to 10%. government, along with his authority being strengthened and a new title, Benevolent Savior, being received. And you won't believe it, this guy used 20 bottles of the drink to write the novel's story. Leaving that aside, we see Miri walking toward the protagonist's house carrying a cake, wondering if he would find it strange that she knew his address. After all, first impressions are important, especially when asking for a favor. And I'll answer for you, yes, it's strange. She goes up to his apartment, and inside he was lying on top of his laptop, feeling sick after drinking so much, almost hallucinating. Mary, a bit nervous, pressed the doorbell, but after a while he didn't answer or open the door. However, since the door was unlocked, she just opened it and entered, calling out for Ilshin, who wasn't home. Meanwhile, Ilshin had gone directly to the manager to deliver the manuscript, and let me tell you, it was an awkward atmosphere between these two as they stare at each other. As the saying goes, blushed. You know what happens. But it got even stranger since this was all just a dream of Ilshin's. He was chained to a chair with some people questioning how he managed to sleep in such a situation. These were precisely the three scammers from the dye shop, who were startled when the protagonist let out an evil laugh, asking for meat, which made the three of them furious. Finally, he woke up and realized where he was, wondering how he had been kidnapped. The leader of the group complimented him for managing to sleep in such a situation, and that Dan eyes showed that he was 31 years old and used insignificant flames. The guy had insignificant flames and our protagonist had a lighter. Fair fight, right? Along with the two who were called weaklings, a protagonist finally recognized them as the scammers from the Hija shop, asking what they wanted with him. And the damn guy with the weak flames had the nerve to say he wanted compensation for the damage he had received the last time. The guy tried to rob him, got angry for not succeeding, and now he was charging the one who stopped him. Did Korea get the latest Brazilian patch by accident? The protagonist complained, saying he didn't have his phone to make the transfer, but the big guys showed that they had been prepared and brought it. But as soon as the protagonist saw the phone screen, he realized that the time until the Imperial Army's invasion had run out, and while he was shouting for them to untie him and throw the phone away, the entire army of his friends started coming out of the screen, consuming one of the weak-muscled men and literally erasing him from existence. Not even his bones were left. The poor guy didn't even have time to ask for help before the entire army got ready, even making the big guys scared since they were just insects. The leader of the group questioned whether the protagonist's ability was really to control insects, underestimating him. He launched "My name is Fireblaze" at the ants, causing the protagonist to wonder if they were supposed to be insignificant since it looked more like a Kamehameha of fire. After the flames died down, the leader, all proud, asked if that was all the protagonist had, warning that he would charge an additional fee for killing his younger brother. But he only fell to the ground after a tiny stone hit his head, and we saw that the ants were still alive, throwing stones with their catapult. Contrary to before, the army increased instead of being wiped out, with the big guy trying to run away in fear, leaving the protagonist behind, shouting for him to take him too. However, with the door not opening, the ants threw stones at him, and he instantly fell, being knocked out or maybe even dragged away. The protagonist was scared as the big guy's body turned to dust, thinking that if he knew the ants were this strong, he would have thrown that damn phone away when he had the chance. The general of the ants warned that all of his subordinates would die, and he would become a snack for the emperor. But behind the ants, the phone began to glow, signaling that the small miracle effect had been activated. Suddenly, a huge lightning bolt fell from the sky, piercing the roof and killing some ants. Of course, it couldn't have been anyone else but her. Saw Mary asking if he was okay, making our protagonist happy to be saved. After she arrived, throwing lightning bolts at the entire army, the general thought that this was truly a blasphemy against the emperor while defending himself from the lightning. He thought that the evil god wasn't even using his own hands anymore, and to have a follower so strong was truly admirable. The protagonist in his mind was seen as the real evil among the villains, capable of destroying the empire and competing for the throne. Since that was the case, he loudly declared that he, Kamakiri, would die there, but at least he would defeat one of the protagonist's followers. Striking a dramatic pose, he took off the cloak he was wearing and defended himself from an attack by the Lightning Empress. In her mind, she could only think about how many insects there were. The soldiers warned the general that he should protect himself and run, but the general just conversed internally with something, the ancient blade that cuts everything, asking for her authority to be passed him. And my friends, we saw a huge being that looked like a door full of eyes, questioning whether he had prepared a worthy sacrifice. With little choice, the general offered the heads of his soldiers as a sacrifice. While the poor soldiers begged him to protect himself, he simply decapitated all of them as a form of simple sacrifice. At that moment, a strange energy began emanating from him. The protagonist was shocked at him killing his own followers, and the eye activated, reading that Kamakiri's specialty was specifically to want to kill Miri. So basically, specialties always involve useful information for the protagonist, not necessarily specializing in that person. We could think, why would it be important for him to have hemorrhoids? At the evaluation center, the general started speaking to to Miri, calling her a follower of the evil god, warning that her disrespect for the great emperor would cost her life. He advanced on her, and of course, she used her special ability, the lightning storm. However, he cut through the thunder and went straight for her. In the last instant, he launched an attack, generating a shockwave. After that, we saw Miri's body on the ground, her helmet separated from her body. While the general said that Ilshin's life would be the only price to pay for disrespecting the emperor, it made him extremely angry when what appeared to be a mimic opened behind him with an unknown authority activating. It was the soundless nightmare, a gift. This authority announced that this nightmare had not yet happened, warning that it was a destiny that would soon occur. However, the protagonist was a being capable of changing mortal destiny and asked if he would like to consume 100,000 god coins in exchange for changing the fate. The protagonist complained about this damn insect while he clicked insane on Miri, who had saved him 3 times, and as soon as he clicked yes, everything began to rewind, consuming 100,000 coins and going back to before her death, changing Miri's fate as the protagonist pulled her just before the attack. He stood beside her with his eyes glowing gold, asking if she was okay. Before the insect could complain completely, the protagonist called it an irritating insect and raised his middle finger, calling it God's condemnation. He flipped the bird at the insect, causing an unbelievably large explosion that blew up the entire warehouse they were in. Realizing this, she thought that he was really the right person to be her master, and through the helmet, it was clear that she blushed. And if she blushed, you know what happens? Vapo. Jumping directly to the protagonist's house, Mary asked him to trust her, calling him master while holding a small shovel and carrying a bag of cement. We see a flashback of the protagonist at the warehouse looking at a small knife he had received from somewhere, wondering where he would use it. Mary then called out to him, asking if he was a hermit, all radiant, asking him to accept being her teacher and make her stronger, as she would do everything she could for it. This led to the current situation, where they were back at the protagonist's house with a huge hole in the wall. He called her by name, but she said he could only call her Mary. He replied that he hadn't said he would be her teacher, but he wanted to know how long she would stay there. Unfortunately, or fortunately, she said she would stay until he taught her. He complained, saying that he was just an ordinary person with a rank of G, so he couldn't teach her. But the stubborn girl said that he had given her that ring, and just that had made her a little stronger. She wanted a chance to at least compensate for breaking his house. Now in the present time, we see Mary with a paint roller in hand and the protagonist's house completely fixed, no hole in the wall anymore. What's even more impressive is that when the protagonist looked out the window, her stomach rumbled so loudly that he even mistook it for thunder. She sheepishly said she was just hungry. The protagonist asked if she would like something to eat, considering how hard she had worked, and she said she wanted janjangmian, which is basically noodles with pork and vegetables. Unfortunately, she received an emergency call and had to leave the invitation for later. The protagonist was a little sad, but since it was like that, she should at least take one of the golden drinks. He bought it in front of her, making her excited because he was just like a hunter Ganghu. He simply said he had no idea who that was, and she should just drink it to satisfy her hunger, telling her to drink it all at once. She said goodbye, mentioning they would meet again next time, and left by jumping out the window, not knowing how to leave through the door. The protagonist said he would have to eat alone, and in the next scene, he was sitting with a big pot of crab noodles and a TV on, where the news reported that due to a rift that appeared in the capital, a dragon known as an S-rank monster had appeared. The protagonist was too busy eating, devouring everything. Fortunately, a hunter arrived early at the scene, but the best he could do was buy time for the citizens to evacuate. And the hunter facing the dragon was none other than our beloved Lightning Empress, who was still rank B, causing our protagonist to spit out his food with this information. The journalist then reported that while some were worried that the hunter wouldn't be enough against an S-rank monster, the reinforcements from the association were far away, so they had to trust her. The protagonist asked if that wasn't dangerous, since an S-rank monster was extremely dangerous. We then directly cut to the location where the huge dragon struck the middle of the city, causing a massive impact. However, Miri was lucky enough to save a student, telling her to go as far away as possible while she held off the dragon. But of course, she didn't expect it to be an S-rank monster, and she knew she wouldn't be able to stop it alone. But she remembered her sister's warning that if she went out doing unnecessary things, her sister would personally leave Miri on the brink of death. She thought that if her sister found out, it would be a huge problem. But this wasn't important right now. She dodged an attack and focused on the situation at hand, launching an electric ball at the dragon, which even knocked it down, making people celebrate a possible victory. She even celebrated too, but of course, it wouldn't be that easy. She received a tail strike that sent her crashing into the ground, shaking all the journalists and citizens around. While she was on the ground, thinking she wouldn't be enough and recalling her sister's words about not getting too worked up since she was still just a rank B, she saw the blessing of the god of growth that had been granted to her. In the middle of a dragon's attack, some damn journalist was just standing there. What's wrong with these crazy people? The journalist started trying to create suspense, asking whether the Empress would live or die for the audience. I think even the dragon got pissed off at this situation as it turned to them in disbelief. disbelief. But luckily for them, behind the dragon, a huge golden light appeared and Mira walked in an extremely stylish pose, releasing golden and blue lightning, channeling energy as she walked toward the dragon, striking a JoJo pose. They were watching all of this inside a restaurant on the television. Doshin spat out all this food while everyone was amazed by the Lightning Empress. Then it was announced that the hunter was currently defeating the S-rank dragon. Ilshin wondered who was teaching whom. They continued saying that they would now show an interview with the Empress Hunter. Blushing slightly, she asked if it was live. Then she kept giving thumbs up, saying to the master that she had finally achieved everything thanks to the potion he had given her. Ilshin noticed that the views have already surpassed 2 million, and this crazy girl was eating in his house. She simply expressed her gratitude, saying it was so good. But Ilshin asked if she shouldn't head home soon. Sadly, she said that no one would worry about her. Ilshin, fiddling with his phone, said there's no way parents wouldn't worry about their daughters. But she looked at him coldly, saying her parents had died in the underground dragon incident. He stared at her in shock because the entire world had come together to defeat that monster, and they had barely managed. It was total terror that claimed millions of lives. Then Ilshin turned away, cursing his foul mouth. That's why he turned back, saying she had used too much energy and asking if she wanted to eat this as well. She looked at him and began smiling, saying of course she'd accept it. While she ate, Ilshin was surprised. The system announced that if a target said the keyword, he could activate Faith. The keyword was, I trust you, you Ilshinim. He asked if this was some kind of romance game, but he realized something else. If Faith activation worked like it did with the Saintess, he could earn a ton of coins. Still, he was worried about when the next ambush from the N army would happen, and the more god coins, the better. Then he called the girl, saying he had a favor to ask. Excitedly, she shouted that he could ask for anything. Confused, he asked if she could repeat what he was about to say. Then he started saying the keyword. As she stood still without saying anything, he knelt down, apologizing for saying something so weird. But excitedly, she said she trusted you, Ilshin. At that moment, the system declared that he had successfully formed Faith, and from now on, Song Mary was his follower. He opened the skill-sharing menu because he could borrow his followers' abilities. Then he angrily shouted that he wanted more coins, while the girl looked confused. She wondered if something was bothering him now, but from the portal, someone appeared, saying that person was the god of the Black Evil tribe. This man said that promising such a divine position to such an arrogant man might mean His Majesty had made a grand decision. They had come to let the evil god know of His Majesty's generosity. The protagonist looked on, thinking he might have to use the lightning storm whenever he wanted. He tried to open the sharing menu, but at that moment, everyone in the room was shocked, and outside, an explosion occurred. The burnt monsters declared that this was the power of the evil god, while the girl blushed, and the neighbors complained that he caused a different commotion every day. He looked sad, thinking that wasn't what mattered. As he cried, someone asked what had happened. After that, in the palace, someone behind the curtain asked if he had massacred their delegation. The monster replied that he emitted lightning, and there was no way to talk. Then the king scolded him, saying it was the locust idea to send a delegation. Someone struck multiple harpoons, impaling the locust while saying he should pay for his sins. The king shouted, ordering them to bring him the head of the evil god for being such a stupid fool. The next day, Mary was running around a park while the protagonist watched. He thought she could run so fast without using any abilities. When she stopped, he asked if she had done 100 laps so quickly. He offered her a potion, asking her to rest afterward. While she drank it, he thought it was just an energy drink for him. After drinking, she asked what she should do next. Then he said it could be squats. As she started, he wondered if he could figure out how to train her using the Eye of the Blind God. The system announced that he had accessed the user's mind point. Inside, he couldn't understand where he was until, after a bright light, a giant chained tiger appeared. Mary takes on the form of a giant golden tiger with chains, releasing a powerful roar, frightening everyone around. It is revealed that Mary's true SS rank nature had been sealed for 10 years, and her ability is limited by SS level chains. The protagonist realizes that Mary was originally S rank and was momentarily unsealed by God's blessing, like a remote control. The protagonist understands that all of Mary's power will be unleashed if the chains binding her are broken, leaving him surprised and curious. The protagonist raises a finger with a determined expression and seems to make a crucial decision about the situation. The scene shifts to a sunny morning where Minoru walks with a friend, while the protagonist watches their interaction from a distance. Mary thanks the teacher for the day and bids farewell, while the protagonist tries to warn her about the potion before she falls asleep. The protagonist is thrown backward by an unknown force, while Mary, surprised, screams upon seeing the attack. The protagonist thinks that even at her current level, she is already powerful, and he imagines how strong she will become once freed from the chains. Finally, the protagonist observes Miri and her chained tiger in the background, reflecting on the situation, and a glow appears in his hand. The protagonist uses the power power of the god's crushing finger, breaking one of the chains binding Mary with an intense glow. He wonders when he will be able to cut all the chains at once and who could have chained Mary since she wouldn't have chained herself. The protagonist decides that he will find out who did this while on the street. People comment about the presence of an academy student. The protagonist walks casually down the street while people watch him, and Mary passes by him unnoticed, her head lowered. Mary is stopped by a masked person who touches her shoulder, indicating a possible interaction or lurking danger. The protagonist is shocked and desperate as he realizes something, holding his head in his hands and screaming in panic. The protagonist sees his house destroyed and says that Mary's chains are not the problem now. His real problem is his house itself. The protagonist receives a notification on his phone while staring at his house and asks in confusion. An alert appears on the phone showing that it is already 11:28, indicating that he might be late for something. On the screen, a monster called Silent Nightmare, a flower with a face, looks at him sadly, indicating a possible threat. The protagonist is annoyed by the phone notifications, saying that he blocked Kakao Talk last time and now something else has appeared. On the screen, the monster 1,000 blades that cuts everything stares at him with resentment, and he recognizes it as the blade he possesses. The 1,000 blades shouts that it is not a mere blade owner, but a divine blade that can cut even gods, creating confusion. The protagonist realizes that the notifications seem to be reading his thoughts and exclaims in confusion about the new information that the monsters are stalkers. The protagonist becomes furious, realizing he now has 2 stalkers, while remembering that he was already irritated to death. The Silent Nightmare and the 1,000 blades send notifications asking him to unblock the flower and return the sword. The protagonist becomes irritated and shouts at them to stop, remembering that he almost died to obtain the divine sword. The 1,000 blades offers 2.2 million divine coins, which it obtained from its army, in exchange for the divine sword. The Silent Nightmare laughs and signals him to give the blade to the flower, offering 10 million coins, leaving the protagonist confused. The protagonist thinks that with that money he could acquire good low-level authority or many items and potions for Mary. The Silent Nightmare mocks the previous money offer, calling it bankrupt, and offers its authority in exchange. The 1,000 blades offers its unique authority, the Ultra Blade, explaining that no one would dare face him with that power. The protagonist seems interested in the Ultra Blade, saying it's something every man would fantasize about, showing his excitement. The Silent Nightmare laughs and asks him to take its authority, the rose that blooms at night, saying he wouldn't even need to sweat with it. The protagonist seems thoughtful and with shining eyes, indicating that he is plotting something with the monster's new information. The protagonist looks at the sky with a smile, asking who will offer more, making it clear that he will take advantage of the offers. On the phone, it shows that he received the Ultra Blade, 2.2 million coins, and 3 uses of the 1,000 blades treasure, along with the Rose of the Night. The protagonist questions what the Ultra Blade and the Rose of the Night are while deciding he will have to save the 3 uses of the blade. He decides he will test the received powers and sits on the ground to use the new abilities, striking a thoughtful pose. He seems confused that the ability didn't work and wonders why it's not activating while checking his phone. The Rose of the Night only activates when the user is asleep, and the protagonist gets irritated because he won't be able to test how it works. The protagonist blames himself for trusting a stalker and decides to test the second authority, the Ultra Blade. The protagonist tries to activate the blade and again it doesn't work, demonstrating frustration with the situation, leaving him irritated. The protagonist yells at the monsters, calling them scammers, and says nothing is working, showing frustration with the abilities. The phone indicates that the Ultra Blade is activating and the protagonist wonders if they are underestimating him with these poor powers. The protagonist feels something strange with the activation, questioning why he is enjoying this sensation, showing that he is feeling something. The protagonist has a sadistic expression, feeling an enormous desire to cut everything, showing that he is being affected by the ability. The protagonist channels the Ultra Blade, which now takes the form of a knife with an intense red aura. The protagonist wonders why he is enjoying this while a voice in his head urges him to cut everything, showing he is losing control. The protagonist shouts that he will cut everything, jumping through the window with an intense aura, leaving his guildmate in despair. The scene shows people at a workplace and someone says, "Good job," with a tone of satisfaction. A woman bids farewell to her colleagues, saying she will leave first, while others confirm the information. A man draws his colleagues' attention, saying they should also leave, while another person remembers there are still vegetables to cut. A woman notices something pointing at a door and saying they caught him, indicating that the protagonist has arrived at the location. The protagonist is seen working there, while his colleagues affirm that he has worked there for years and helps a lot with tasks. The protagonist, still under the effect of the Ultra Blade, cuts vegetables with a psychotic look, saying he wants to cut everything. The protagonist finds himself entering his apartment and says he's going to die, indicating that he feels the consequences of the blade. He realizes how dangerous the Ultra Blade is, saying it is controlling people on its own, causing concern. He throws himself onto the bed relieved, saying he thought something bad would happen and that he will never touch the blade again. The protagonist feels pain in his hip from overusing his body with a knife and lies on the floor, showing exhaustion. A group of insect-like creatures asks if the evil god is asleep, while one of them confirms. A demon-like creature claims that the honor of killing the evil god will be theirs, expressing satisfaction. A dark and imposing figure emerges in the middle of a purple aura, claiming that she will take the seat of the 10 blades, replacing the spider. The insect-like creature commands the others to move, indicating they are starting some kind of attack or mission. The protagonist is seen sleeping deeply in his bed, while a calm expression on his face indicates that he is resting. A red rose with thorns appears, glowing intensely, showing that the flower's ability has begun to act. The leader of the insects is surprised to see the rose glowing, indicating that her plans for the evil god have started to go wrong. On the phone, a notification shows the glowing rose, indicating that the Rose of the Night ability has been activated without the protagonist realizing. The notification states that the conditions for activating the unique authority of the Silent Nightmare, the rose that blooms at night, have been fulfilled. The insects begin to move while the leader stares in the protagonist's direction, noticing the activation of the Rose of the Night. A large shadowy creature emerges amidst a purple aura, but the protagonist in the middle of the scene, along with a red rose. In the protagonist's room, plants with teeth begin to sprout, indicating the emergence of a threat while he sleeps. The leader of the insects is shocked to see the appearance of the plants, realizing that the situation has completely changed. The Rose of the Night emerges in its complete form along with the plants that accompany it, and the notification warns the creatures to tremble in fear. The scene reveals that the flower that has now appeared is the legendary Nightmare Flower, indicating its power and danger. The confirmation that it is the Nightmare Flower highlights the gravity of the situation, showing that it is an immense threat. The Nightmare Flower begins to appear on top of the protagonist's house, while the insects watch apprehensively. The insect leader says she read about the flower in her tribe's documents, revealing that it is an ancient and powerful threat. While the protagonist sleeps, the caption says he is the disciple of the Silent Nightmare, and the Nightmare Flower reveals the power he has gained. Despite fearing the flower's power, the insect leader remains confident and says they must not be afraid, declaring that today will go down in history. The insect leader is shocked when she sees the flower, feeling that something very bad is about to happen, while the other insects react. The insects swear to follow their leader, demonstrating loyalty as they advance into battle, their eyes glowing intensely. The leader commands the insects to approach the flower's main body, dodging its branches, while the flower grows rapidly. The insect leader screams in pain when she is attacked by one of the flower's branches, seeing others being struck as well, demonstrating the flower's danger. The flower reveals a hole full of sharp teeth, and the insect leader and her troops prepare to battle against it. One of the insects cries for help as it is caught by the flower, showing the danger it represents, and the leader decides to take action. The insect leader finds herself surrounded by the flower's branches and realizes she will not be able to kill the evil god alone. She decides to use the Nightmare Flower as her companion in death as she is enveloped by a red aura. The insect leader flies towards the flower, her spear glowing red, indicating she is about to use a powerful attack. She enters the flower's hole, preparing for the final attack, while the flower reacts. The insect leader is shocked to see her final attack absorbed by the flower in one gulp, showing its futility. One of the insect creatures watches the flower as it absorbs the leader's attack power, creating a suspenseful scene. The scene shows that the situation is impossible for the insect leader, reinforcing the idea that the flower is invincible. The insect leader appears in close-up with a look of despair on her face, demonstrating that she is in danger. The protagonist, still sleeping, mutters that he needs a little more meat, while the flower appears and he tosses and turns in bed, indicating he is also being affected. The protagonist sits up in bed, asking what is happening, indicating that the flower is interacting with him. He sits on the bed, asking why his stomach feels so full, showing that he has absorbed the flower's power. The protagonist, confused, picks up his phone, asking what is happening now, indicating that something new is about to emerge. A notification appears saying that the Holy Maiden and her 101 followers desperately want to be rescued, while a flower and insects appear on the screen. The protagonist wonders if the Holy Maiden is not feeling well as he tries to understand what is happening, showing concern. He activates the Blind God's Eye ability with an expression of discomfort, indicating he does not understand the situation. It is revealed that the assessment of the Holy Maiden and her followers is complete, and that they are addicted to the poison of the killer bee tribe. The protagonist wonders how they became addicted to bee venom while reflecting on the information he received, showing his concern. The protagonist wonders what to give to ants addicted to venom, showing he is trying to solve the ants' problem. He receives a notification that the miracle menu has been activated due to his sincere thoughts, leaving him confused. The protagonist wonders what this miracle is as he stares at his phone with curiosity, showing he is intrigued. The notification explains that the miracle is one of the most important things for a god, and that, depending on the miracle, his believers may worship or fear him. To perform a healing miracle, divine power and 100,000 divine coins are required, and the and the protagonist accepts without hesitation. It is revealed that a portion of the fruit of the world tree was used as an ingredient for the miracle, and the miracle is performed according to the protagonist's will, while the holy maiden reacts. The protagonist wonders if they will be okay now and says that he just woke up and feels very sleepy as he falls back to the ground. The protagonist sleeps deeply, while his title of Merciful Redeemer is promoted from Class E to D. It is shown that Yu Ilshin's tendency has changed from evil to neutral, showing that he's becoming a better person. Some benevolent gods, including the Abundant of Abundance, begin to notice the protagonist's actions. A character spits black blood, indicating that they have been defeated or affected by something evil or powerful. The Holy Maiden vomits and laments, showing that she is suffering the consequences of the bee venom. She begs God to have mercy on her tribe and grant a miracle, showing her desperation. A ray of light strikes the Holy Maiden, indicating that the miracle is being performed while she appears surprised. The Holy Maiden is astonished by the light, showing that she is witnessing the miracle unfold before her eyes. A golden rain falls from the sky, demonstrating the power of the miracle, and the Holy Maiden's tribe raises their hands to the heavens. The rain washes away the poison, while the Holy Maiden and her tribe thank God Yu Ilshin for the blessing they have received. The Holy Maiden expresses her gratitude to Yu Ilshin, showing that she is overjoyed by what has happened. She cries while giving thanks wholeheartedly for the miracle received, indicating her deep gratitude for the help. She announces to her tribe that Yu Ilshin has saved them once again, and that they must repay him with unwavering faith. The tribe decides to offer a tribute to the protagonist as proof of their faith, while rays of light fall from the sky, showing that they are accepting their role as believers. The protagonist wakes up mumbling something while a strand of drool runs down his mouth, showing that he is exhausted. He asks what time it is and why he feels so tired while sitting on the bed, indicating confusion about the situation. A voice says that he is awake, suggesting that someone is in the room, making the protagonist curious. The protagonist is surprised to see Miri in his room, showing concern about her presence. Miri explains that he missed training, so she came out of concern, and the protagonist apologizes, showing that they are close. She notices something strange in the room and asks about it, while the protagonist wonders what it is. The notification shows that the Black Tribe has made a statue of Yu Ilshin with gratitude and fanaticism, but that it is ugly as hell. Mary says the statue is ugly, while the protagonist stares at it, and Mary says that the more she looks at it, the more beautiful it becomes, showing change of opinion. Mary says the statue is amazing and asks if she can keep it, shocking the protagonist, who thinks she should see a doctor. The protagonist says he won't be able to train today, and Miri accepts it without a fuss, showing their friendship and good relationship. The protagonist receives another notification and decides to work on the script while wondering what is happening now, showing that he is quite busy. The Holy Maiden and her followers are praying in a circle, thanking the protagonist for the miracle received, indicating devotion. A small plant sprouts from the ground, indicating that the miracle is having effects beyond healing. A notification shows that the plant is a sprout of the world tree, which appeared thanks to Yu Ilshin's miracle, but it is sick and could wither in 24 hours. The protagonist is shocked to discover that the world tree sprout is sick, remembering that it was the fruit that healed him and that the blessing had no effect. He decides that he will nurture and grow the tree to sell its fruits, showing that he always thinks about making money. The protagonist, with a frightened look, decides to search for something useful in the store, while a shadowy face appears behind him. He becomes happy upon finding something on his phone, indicating that he has found something to cure the world tree. The item found is the Tears of Generous Abundance, which costs 20,000 divine coins and requires completing a mission before purchase. The protagonist uses tweezers to pick up some cigarette butts from the ground, showing that he's about to do something with them. He collects others' trash and questions whether he really needs to do this to save the world tree. Then he receives a notification that he contributed to cleaning the world and that his good deeds score increased by 1, showing that the path is slow. It is shown that the protagonist has 10 100ths on the good deeds score before completing the mission, showing how far he is from his goal. The protagonist is approached by someone who questions what he is doing in their territory, while he looks confused by the confrontation. A tall and intimidating man appears behind him, shocking the protagonist with his presence. The man scolds the protagonist for being a rookie and stepping into his territory, and the protagonist wonders if the man is a beggar. The protagonist stammers upon realizing he has seen this man before, indicating he is remembering something important. He says he thinks there's been a misunderstanding while trying to get out of the situation, showing that he is scared. It is revealed that homeless people are very sensitive about their territories, showing a characteristic of the man presumed to be a beggar. The man takes money from the protagonist's hand and tells him to buy a hot meal, showing that he felt sympathy for the protagonist. The man becomes angry when called a beggar and reveals that his name is Choi Kangson, generating fear in the protagonist. The protagonist remembers that Choi Kangson was a famous rank as hunter, and the situation changes drastically, indicating fear. The protagonist tries to apologize and asks what happened, trying to understand the situation, but still afraid. The rank as hunter, Choi Kangson, coughs imposingly while staring at the protagonist with an intimidating look, indicating he's about to act. Kota Kangsen says he won't reject the protagonist's goodwill while touching his face, and the protagonist wonders what he is doing. The protagonist wonders why his good deed score didn't increase despite giving money to the man, showing confusion. Kota Kangsen drinks from a bottle of alcohol, indicating he is relaxing, and the protagonist notices he hadn't drunk before. The protagonist calls the hunter grandpa, irritating him, showing that he didn't like it. The protagonist offers to throw trash into Choi Kangsen's bag, showing respect and calling him Hyunnim. Choi Kangsen mocks the protagonist, saying he has good eyes, and asks where he's from, showing interest. The protagonist hears a loud noise, and Choi Kangsen notices the sound, indicating something is about to happen in the city. Choi Kangsen realizes a monster has appeared in the city, and the protagonist becomes scared by the situation. Choi Kangsen drinks another bottle of alcohol while observing the direction of the sound, wondering what's happening, showing he is aware of the monsters. Kota Kangsen pulls the protagonist by the collar, saying he will go with him, and the protagonist wonders what is happening. Kota Kangsen throws the protagonist into the air, saying he likes him, while the protagonist desperately says he doesn't want to go, showing panic. The protagonist is in freefall with a terrified look, trying to understand what's happening while being carried by the rank as hunter. A huge monster called Beelzebub appears, and Choi Kangsen says he will take the opportunity to train, showing that he is not afraid of monsters. A mysterious voice says it looks like there will be frog legs for dinner, indicating that he sees Choi Kangsen and the protagonist as prey. It is revealed that the monster intends to use the protagonist as an offering for his master, and that he arrived before the others, indicating his interest in the protagonist's power. The monster tells Choi Kangsen to get out of the way, calling him an old human, showing that the monster is arrogant and strong. Choi Kangsen remains silent and serious, staring at the monster, showing that he did not like being called an old human. Kota Kangsen realizes how big the monster is and the difference in level between them, while the protagonist lies unconscious on the ground. Kota Kangsen shouts and channels his energy, unleashing his power, indicating that the fight is about to begin, while the protagonist remains unconscious. Kota Kangsen shouts at the monster to leave the protagonist alone and attacks the monster with an energy-charged punch. It is shown that the protagonist was thrown far away and remains unconscious, while his phone notifies him that his ability is detecting danger. The nightmare flower appears in its complete form, while insect creatures react to the flower's power, demonstrating that it is acting. The notification indicates that the ability Rose That Blooms at Night from Silent Nightmare has been activated, showing that the protagonist's power is being used. Kota Kangsen attacks the monster again, and the monster reacts with its own attack, demonstrating that the battle has begun. It is shown that the world tree is glowing while the protagonist is somewhere else, showing that the tree is acting on another plane. The protagonist wakes up confused, wondering where he is, showing that he does not know what is happening but realizes he is in a different place. The protagonist looks to the side and sees the Holy Maiden in a temple, showing that he is in another location and that the Holy Maiden is acting. The protagonist hesitates and asks what is happening, while the Holy Maiden stares at him with a dark look, indicating that something bad might happen. The Holy Maiden says that he has awakened while staring at him with a threatening look and a slight smile, showing that she is different and not the same person he knew before. The protagonist, with a confused expression, questions his role as a benevolent god, while remembering something important. The protagonist reappears amidst a purple aura and wonders where he is, showing that he does not understand what is happening. The protagonist wonders where he is and complains that his mother is preventing him from training while checking his phone. The protagonist remembers being eaten by a large flower and becomes frightened while looking at Choi Kangsen's body. The protagonist smells something bad and wonders if he fell into the sewer, showing that he has returned to his world but is now smelly. A notification appears stating that he defeated a subordinate of the evil god and brought peace to the world, leaving him shocked and confused. It is shown that the protagonist exceeded the mission requirements tenfold, demonstrating how powerful he has become. The protagonist receives the item Generous Abundance as a reward and says that the item's ability will activate and heal the tree. The protagonist imagines that he will become rich, showing his greedy side, while money notes fall from the sky like a miracle. The notification states that he successfully revived the world tree and replenished the Black Tribe, and the protagonist wonders what to do with Choi Kangsen. It is informed that the greater the influence of the protagonist's followers, the stronger his divine powers will become, showing the importance of believers. The protagonist says that everything should be fine while hearing the sound of ambulance sirens, showing that something has happened. It is revealed that the Black Tribe gave 2 stone statues of the protagonist to thank him for reviving the tree, leaving him shocked. Kota Kangsen is shown leaving the hospital while 2 people comment that he handled the monsters easily, showing his strength. One person says they knew Choi Kangsen was still strong and still had his previous energy, demonstrating they are a fan of the hunter. A person asks if Choi Kangsen is okay, show a concern for his health, indicating that something might be wrong. It is revealed that Choi Kang-sin had an allergic reaction to the flowers they tried to give him, shocking the people caring for him. A man asks how things are with the Academy Hunters, indicating that they are preparing for the next event. It is stated that Kang-sin will be a good teacher for the Lightning Empress, showing that he will train her. It is stated that much is expected from the best teacher, his talented student, while the city remains quiet, showing that this is the beginning of a new chapter. The protagonist says it is annoying to have his house destroyed and that he will have to fix it again, showing that he dislikes mess. The statues he received move and strike a pose, showing that they are alive and are worshipping the protagonist. The protagonist wonders what to do with the statues, saying they do not look like him. While a notification sounds, the protagonist, confused, receives a message from the Holy Maiden's group and wonders who is messaging him. The notification informs that due to the statues, his favorability with Antrinia has increased by 105, and the protagonist questions how they are sending messages. The Holy Maiden asks him to save her tribe members, and the protagonist wonders what is happening, while the other ants show fear. It is informed that the members of the Black Tribe were attacked by demonic beasts, and one of the ants is suffering greatly. The protagonist shouts and asks who dared to mess with his followers, while others react in fear. The protagonist orders them to take him to the demonic beasts and says he will deal with them with his own hands, demonstrating great anger and determination. The Black Tribe thanks the protagonist for the blessing, worshipping and expressing gratitude, showing that he is their savior. The protagonist tells his followers to take him to the enemies, saying he is a little too excited, while his followers follow him. A scene shifts to a forest, and the sounds of the characters' footsteps indicate they are approaching the location, showing the tension of the scene. The protagonist complains about the insects taking too long while he waits for them to guide him, showing his impatience. The Holy Maiden and another insect are startled by the protagonist's size and tremble in fear, showing how large he has become. The protagonist wonders what is happening now while sitting at home with his phone, showing that he is not enjoying the situation. A notification appears stating that he is scanning a target, and frightening sounds arise in the forest, indicating the danger he will face. The protagonist is shocked to see insects with red eyes, wondering if these are the enemies that attacked his followers, showing his fear. The protagonist jumps in fear upon seeing so many enemies and screams in fright while the insects surround him, showing he is not prepared to fight. It is revealed that the enemies are demonic cockroaches that duplicate every hour, and the protagonist panics as the cockroaches surround him. The protagonist jumps again in fear, screaming that they are cockroaches, demonstrating his terror while being surrounded. A notification appears informing that the cockroaches are summoned from hell and double in number every hour, with 1 second remaining, showing that the situation is critical. An imposing temple is shown, while someone asks if another person is sure about some information, demonstrating that they are in a place of power. One person confirms that they witnessed the demonic beasts summoned from hell in the last war, indicating that they are a constant threat. It is stated that the body of the evil god will be offered in up to 3 days, and if the subordinate fails, death will be certain, showing the severity of the punishment. Someone is shown running desperately down a red corridor, indicating they have an urgent message to deliver, creating tension. A creature gets angry for making a commotion and says it won't let it pass, while it is informed that the cockroaches have multiplied into millions, showing the gravity of the situation. A creature says that the evil god is cruel, showing that he is a tyrant, while he stares at the creature next to him. It is shown that cockroaches have invaded the area, indicating the gravity of the situation as the enemies are not being contained. A large number of cockroaches are shown falling into a hole, indicating they are concentrating in one place, creating fear. Platforms where the tribe is located are shown, indicating they are trying to protect themselves from the cockroach attack as the insects fall toward the hole. It is shown that the cockroaches are concentrating in one place, indicating something is happening there, generating fear and tension. The protagonist covers himself with a towel and breathes a sigh of relief, indicating that he survived a difficult situation. The protagonist appears in a completely destroyed room, relieved to find his pesticides, showing his fear of cockroaches. The protagonist observes the cockroaches falling from the sky and says that there are still some alive, showing their persistence. The protagonist sees the scene of the cockroaches falling and says that they are trying hard, using a skill that destroys the insects, demonstrating strength. The protagonist sees the Holy Maiden standing and wonders what she is doing, while she stares at him strangely. The Holy Maiden is startled by the protagonist's appearance and wonders what happened, demonstrating that she is confused. The protagonist receives a notification and screams in fear, showing that he did not like what was written on his phone. The Holy Maiden cries, thinking that she doubted God Yu Ilshin and asks for forgiveness for abandoning him, indicating that she is blaming herself. The Holy Maiden asks the protagonist to kill her, while he says that would be too much, indicating he wouldn't do it. The protagonist calms down and tries to understand the situation, receiving a notification stating that he has met the conditions to create a unique authority, demonstrating that he has grown stronger. The protagonist wonders if God's multiplier thumb is a good skill and decides to choose it, as it costs only 100 coins. It is shown that authority arises from faith, fear, and great deeds, while the protagonist says that he will get even stronger and doesn't understand the 8th grade syndrome comments. The protagonist goes to test his new skill and walks to the kitchen, indicating that he's about to start taking action. The protagonist questions what is happening now as he looks at his phone and a notification appears, demonstrating confusion. The protagonist is shocked and screams upon seeing the notification on his phone, demonstrating that the message is urgent. It is shown that the protagonist's manager urgently asks to meet him and the protagonist panics, indicating that something bad is about to happen. The protagonist hands a bottle with a strange liquid to the manager, while he shows confidence, indicating that he wants to impress his superior. The manager pours some of the drink into the protagonist's cup, showing a good relationship, and the protagonist confirms the action. The manager drinks the beverage and the protagonist watches him drink, while wondering why his superior is staring at him like that. The manager calls the protagonist Mr. Author and asks why he is staring at him like that, while the protagonist feels intimidated and says that everything is fine. The manager asks why the protagonist is so slow with his work, demonstrating irritation with the situation. The manager yells at the protagonist, saying that he must trust his manager and follow him, while the protagonist wonders why he is shouting. The manager says he feels uncomfortable in the protagonist's company, while the protagonist questions why he is being called a damned author. The protagonist receives a notification that the cockroaches are attacking again and says that he will do what he can to deal with the situation. The manager grabs the protagonist and yells at him, asking how he dares to use a game in that situation, while the protagonist gets scared. The manager throws the protagonist out of the place and says that he will fix his rotten spirit, while people stare at him in fear. A starry night appears, indicating that time has passed, and red lights in the trees indicate that cockroaches are emerging. The protagonist summons a skill that glows red while preparing to fight the cockroaches, demonstrating that he will not run away. The Holy Maiden and her tribe thank the miracle they received from Ilshin, while the protagonist prepares to fight the cockroaches. The Holy Maiden shows a grim expression and says that all the cockroaches will be eliminated without exception, demonstrating that she will not run away anymore and will deal with the insects. It is notified that the protagonist has subjugated the demonic beasts of calamity and obtained 300 million divine coins, showing that he has become very strong. The protagonist is shown in the middle of the city, while it is calm, indicating the end of an event and that he is now safe. A notification informs that Eternal Abundant Prosperity has offered to sponsor Ilshin, and the protagonist burps in surprise. It is revealed that the protagonist can choose any authority as a reward, and Eternal Abundant Prosperity will cover the expenses, and the protagonist gets scared. The protagonist says that he can choose any authority for free and will choose the most expensive one, showing that he wants to take advantage of the sponsor. The notification appears informing that the protagonist has chosen an authority, generating anticipation about which one he selected. It is revealed that the protagonist chose the skill Creation of Heaven and Earth, which is exclusive to a transcendent god and costs 1 quintillion divine coins, showing how greedy he is. The protagonist wonders if that skill was really that expensive, while feeling relieved to have acquired it, indicating that he is satisfied. It is informed that Ilshin's level is too low to use Creation of Heaven and Earth, showing that his power level is still insufficient for the skill. The skill was partially modified to fit the protagonist's level and will be limited to a single use, while the world is being reformed and the protagonist tries to use it with danger alerts. The protagonist's feet appear as he steps out of the bath, indicating that he is preparing for a new day. Mary is asked by her sister why she is awake instead of sleeping, showing a routine in their home. She asks her sister to look at the sky, and her sister questions what is so interesting about it, indicating that Mary noticed something. The protagonist wonders what is happening, while the crush can appear as being picked up by pincers, indicating he is experiencing something. People look at the sky in fear, asking if that isn't illegal, while one of them says that they are scared, showing concern for the situation. A man in a suit stares ahead, indicating that he is observing something and he appears serious about the situation. A man with red hair and mysterious expression is shown, indicating that he is planning something. A man looks to the side with a thoughtful expression, indicating that he is reflecting on something. The moon appears large in the sky and a city is also shown, indicating that the action is about to begin somewhere else, while the moon shines intensely. A person looks ahead with a mysterious expression, indicating that they are thinking about something important and will act. A man with a dark aura asks if anyone said Empress of Lightning, showing interest in the name. The man asks if that is the name of the hunter who was interfering with the guild master's business, and another person confirms. A smiling man says it's about time and asks how many people they need to solve that problem, showing that he is planning something against the Empress. The smiling man says that the more they suffer, the better, and that he will use 2,000 people for now, showing his sadism. The man says he will fulfill someone's wish, while a purple power surrounds him, demonstrating power and control. A moon appears in the sky, and it is said that God's salvation will be granted to this ugly world, indicating that the protagonist's power is at work. It is revealed that the MTS-2 exploration team is reporting a new status, demonstrating that other teams are also acting. A spaceship with a strong glow is shown, and someone wonders what is happening with MTS-2, indicating that the protagonist's power is affecting other areas. A planet is shown being surrounded by green energy, while it is warned that passing through this gas is impossible, and someone screams, indicating that something bad is about to happen. It is reported that with the sudden appearance of another moon, many people were surprised, showing that the protagonist's ability is affecting the entire world. It is informed that the new moon emits golden light at night and green light during the day, and experts predict that the number of portal and dungeon breaks will increase significantly. The Korea Hunter Association asks all governments and associations to meet in response to the second moon phenomenon, showing that the situation is critical. The protagonist complains that his head is about to explode while being informed that Mary has finished her run, showing that the two are training. The protagonist asks if Mary ran 500 laps, and she confirms, saying it took a while, showing that she is strong and that he is proud of her. The protagonist asks if they can start with the planks now, while Mary thinks he finds the core important, showing that the protagonist cares about her development. The protagonist thinks that he needs to enter Mary's inner world again, while lightning and currents appear behind him, indicating that he will use some kind of skill. The protagonist asks Mary to stay in place and orders the plank training to begin while preparing to activate his skill. A notification appears, informing that the unique authority Eyes of the Blind God has been activated, demonstrating the use of his power. A notification appears, informing that he is entering the person's inner world while preparing to enter Mary's mind. The protagonist appears in Mary's inner world with strange power and wonders if what he is seeing is cute, demonstrating confusion about the situation. The protagonist is startled when he sees the huge tiger with chains in Mary's inner world while trying to understand what is going on. The protagonist uses the god's crushing finger to break several chains of the tiger, indicating that he is making progress. The protagonist thinks that there is still a long way to go before the tiger is freed, but that he is making progress, and he also realizes that the tiger isn't afraid of him, showing that the interaction is working. The protagonist decides to see if Mary's skills have improved, while the tiger licks his face, indicating that her power is increasing. The large lightning bolt appears in the sky, showing Mary's increase in power while the protagonist observes. The protagonist and Mary notice the effects of the training, and Mary says that the master's training is working, but the protagonist knows that her power is still sealed. The protagonist asks Mary to be careful because there are many onlookers nearby, while she thanks the protagonist for the training, showing respect. The protagonist thinks he is happy that the training is working and says Mary will finish with 200 more laps, showing his sadistic side. The protagonist receives a message from the Saint Maiden, asking him to give her a name, and the protagonist wonders what's happening now. The protagonist thinks that he can't keep calling her Saint Maiden, and that he needs to give her a name, indicating that he is accepting the role of God. The protagonist thinks that Branquinha is a dog name and asks if he should call her Karen, demonstrating that he doesn't know what to do. The protagonist's manager appears, irritated, saying that he has no sense when it comes to naming, and dark energy emerges from him, while the protagonist doesn't like his comment. The protagonist decides to call her Lil Ant and wonders what others think of the name, showing that he didn't think much about it. But Little Ant is shown with an excited look, while she waits for the protagonist's name, showing anticipation. The little ant gets excited about the name and turns red with bright eyes, showing that she liked the name the protagonist gave her. The little ant's followers ask the protagonist to give them names too, showing that everyone wants a name given by him. The protagonist wonders how he will give names to so many people and decides to call them by numbers, demonstrating a lack of creativity. The protagonist says that nothing compares to his house, showing that he's a homebody and enjoys his privacy while walking down the street. The protagonist is happy that the repairs on his house are finished and that he will finally rest, showing how tired he was. The protagonist receives a notification that the little ant's tribe has evolved and that they are very cute, while he wonders what's happening. It is reported that due to the evolution of the Formica tribe, the cockroach summoning experience was converted, and Yu Ilshin is now level 2, leaving him shocked. It is reported that due to the level increase, civilization's renaissance has been created, leaving the protagonist confused and anxious for more information. The protagonist's followers are shocked as they see the forest change, while it transforms into something different, showing astonishment. The little ant asks what miracle the protagonist will grant them this time, showing how anxious she is to receive her god's blessing. The protagonist says that he will finally be able to start customizing the insect world, while using his phone, indicating that he's about to enjoy his godly powers. The Formica tribe is shown planting seeds, indicating that the new ability is creating resources for them, showing progress. The Formica tribe is shown creating several houses while they work, indicating that their civilization is advancing. The protagonist says that he has now created a training field and that the insects will be able to train to defend themselves, showing that he is evolving the tribe. The Formica tribe thanks Yu Ilshin for the miracle, and everyone praises their god, showing that their faith is strong and unshakable. The protagonist thinks that they are funny and says that he is doing this for his own good, showing that he isn't as good as he appears. The protagonist says that the little ant's followers are getting cuter, and that the tribe's name is also cute, showing that he's enjoying the situation. The protagonist asks if Formica means ant in Latin, while thinking about how to evolve the insects, showing that he wants to learn more about the game. The protagonist decides to check out the other functions of the game while wondering what they do, demonstrating interest in the new system. A dark tower appears, saying it is the Tower of Warriors and that it consumes the souls of challengers. challengers, while the protagonist is startled by what is written. The notification informs that the Formica tribe is afraid of the Tower of Warriors and that it needs blood and souls, and the protagonist wonders if the survival rate is 1/1000. The protagonist sees that the insects are trying to break down the wall to enter the tower and decides to close the entrance, showing that he wants to protect his followers. The protagonist breaks down the wall with a skill and says that no one should enter the tower even out of curiosity, showing that he cares for them. The little ant is shown admiring Yu Il-shin's power, saying that he is an impressive person, demonstrating that she admires the protagonist. A man is shown among the protagonist's followers with a mysterious look, and he is thinking something while throwing some stones into the air. The man thinks that the tower can only be challenged by the bravest and looks up while throwing the stones upwards again, wondering what will happen. The blue-haired man is startled when he sees a huge monster and asks the others to run, while asking for help, indicating that he is in danger. The blue-haired man decides that he needs to get stronger, showing that he is frustrated with the current situation and needs to evolve. A dark creature appears, and he wonders why the situation has become so bad and what is happening, demonstrating confusion and astonishment. The dark creature uses its hands and claws to attack, indicating that it is very strong and that others are in danger. A creature is startled by the dark creature's power and asks to be saved, showing that it is desperate to survive. The dark creature appears surrounded by purple power and says that it is doing everything alone because the other creatures are useless, showing its power and arrogance. It is revealed that the dark creature doesn't like doing all the work alone, saying that the other creatures are useless and inferior, demonstrating its contempt for them. The scene changes, showing a dark rocky wall, while strange sounds are heard, indicating that something's about to happen. A creature emerges from a dark place and screams in pain, indicating that something is happening to it, showing that it is suffering. A creature with red eyes and wings emerges from the darkness, indicating that it is going to do something bad and that it is dangerous. A creature appears and calls the blue-haired man a white bloodsucker, greeting him by saying welcome, showing that it is a dangerous and sadistic person. The creature says that the evil god will pay for going against the will of its imperial majesty, showing that it is serving someone superior to itself. It is revealed that the creature possesses a cursed needle given by the abominable plague bearer, indicating that the creature is a servant of the plague. The creature says it understands what needs to be done, but it has a request, indicating that it has something to bargain with. It is shown that the creature is acting elsewhere, demonstrating that it is preparing to do what is necessary, showing that it is in a different environment. The protagonist is shouting and desperate while at his computer, demonstrating that something has happened, while his house is shattered. A dark voice says that if the protagonist doesn't meet his quota this week, his contract will be cancelled, indicating the severity of the situation. The protagonist slams his hand on the table, saying that he can't let his contract be cancelled, while dark energy surrounds him, indicating his frustration. The protagonist tries to calm himself, saying that he needs to finish his work while feeling desperate, showing that he needs money. The protagonist thinks about what the others are doing, demonstrating that he is curious about what will happen and that he cares about the others. The Formica tribe's homes are shown, with everyone sleeping peacefully, while the protagonist thinks they are lazy for being so comfortable. The protagonist is startled when he sees a huge building appear out of nowhere, saying that it is pure muscle, demonstrating his interest in power and strength while admiring it. A rock is shown falling while the protagonist thinks of something with the word muscle, indicating that he wants to become stronger. The blue-haired man uses his muscles and says that the rock was very strong, while the protagonist wonders if he is an idiot or not. It is revealed that the man is a Gayami warrior named Ilho, and that he trains to protect his family, indicating his motivation. The protagonist says that it is fun to create and watch characters evolve, and that he will help the Gayami warrior, demonstrating how sadistic he is. A pot of oil appears and a strange sound is heard, while the man stares at it curiously, showing that he doesn't understand what's happening. The warrior examines the pot of oil and wonders what it is while he grabs the pot with his hands, showing his curiosity. The warrior wonders if that is a gift from Yu Il-shin, while he looks at the pot closely, demonstrating that he is amazed and surprised by the gift. The warrior begins to cry, saying that Yu Il-shin is watching over him, while his faith increases, indicating that he's becoming a believer and servant of Yu Il-shin. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.